Hey, what's up, everybody? It's John with Skillet. You are listening to the Thunder Underground.
Welcome to episode 341 of the Thunder Underground podcast. Trent here as always. This week we've got a cool one because we've got John Cooper of Skillet joining the podcast. Very cool stuff. We've got about a 30-minute interview with John coming up here in just a bit, talking about their brand new album, Dominion, that just came out in January, and a lot of other great stuff. Gonna dive into that here in a bit, but first up, we've got to talk about a couple other things. We've got to run through our sponsors, all that great stuff. Here we are right at the beginning of March. This year's already starting to fly by, right? I don't know. People say that all the time as they get older, but here we are. Anyway, coming up this weekend, March 4th, in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, Seven Dust and Tetrarch will be at the Diamond Ballroom. This tour is actually kicking off that day in Oklahoma City and running through America. So if you're anywhere that tour is near, check it out. I'm sure by now, if you're a living, breathing human being that listens to rock music, you know that Seven Dust is one of the best live bands you can see. And here we are 25 years after their debut album, and they're still one of the most consistent hard rock, heavy metal acts out there. Can't ever go wrong. John Connolly from Seven Dust was actually on this podcast. It's been a while back now, probably 3 years ago. That was a real fun one. And then, speaking of the opener, Tetrarch, Diamond Rowe, the lead guitarist, she was on here just this past year talking about their new album, and they've really made some noise here in this past year or two. So if you're not familiar with Tetrarch, check them out. Even if you're not going to the show, any of the shows on this tour, be sure and check them out. Great new band that I imagine will, 25 years from now, we'll be talking about them still, just like Seven Dust. Can you imagine 25 years from now, podcast? Will that even be a thing? 25 years ago, podcasts weren't a thing, even though the internet was already with us. But 25 years from now, it'll probably be like, hey, I wonder what an interview with John Cooper from Skillet would be like. And then it just pops into your head, digitally streams right there into your mind. Okay, sorry to get off on a weird tangent there. Anyway, Seven Dust, Tetrarch in Oklahoma City this weekend, kicking off that tour. There's a good chance I will be out there. So if you're out there, say what's up. March 4th is also my parents' 55th anniversary. I know that has nothing to do with music, but that's something that should be celebrated, right? 55 years. A lot of people are lucky to make it 5 months. So, good on my parents for being the badasses that they are, and a happy anniversary to them. So, anyway, let me jump into our sponsors real quick. MedFarm is a dispensary located in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. 24683 East Highway 51. They're right off the highway. One of the great things about MedFarm is they have a drive-thru. Not only that, their drive-thru is open 24 hours a day. There aren't many dispensaries around that can say that, at least in Oklahoma that I know of. If you call, text, or email ahead, you can place your order. So all you have to do is run through that drive-thru, pick it up, and be on your way. You can also go in, of course. Their entire selection's online at leafly.com if you want to check it out before you head in. If not, they've got a big selection. They're always running specials on their social medias. Follow them, MedFarm on Facebook, that's PHRM, and on Instagram, it's MedFarmOK. Their website is medfarmok.com. If you mention Thunder Underground, they'll give you 10% off your first order, which is awesome. But what is even more awesome than that is 30% of their proceeds at all times go to build no-kill animal shelters. So I know that there's a million dispensaries that you can check out and hit up. But this is the reason you need to hit up MedFarm. Even if there's one next door to your house, which there probably is these days, drive the extra 10 or 15 minutes over to MedFarm because a third of what you're spending is going to an amazing cause. But a huge thank you to MedFarm. Sunset Tattoos, a tattoo shop located in Midtown Tulsa. Their tattoos are done good and proper. They're state licensed. They are mother approved. 25 plus years of experience. You can see pictures of all their work on Instagram at Sunset Tattoo Tulsa. Same thing on Facebook. Personally, I've had a tattoo done at Sunset Tattoo by Jake, and I know a few other people that have as well. There's also many touring musicians out there that have had Jake do tattoos on them. So if you want to be like a rock star, hit up Jake, give him a call, shoot him an email to set up a time to figure out and talk about what work you want to have done. This guy can do it all. So hit up Jake and tell him you heard about him here. DEB Concerts is a promoter based in Tulsa, Oklahoma. They keep bringing some great acts to the Tulsa area. Bands like Saxon, Last in Line, Winger, Buck Cherry, Steelheart, Bisto Blanco. There's a long list. They're also booking shows now at the BOK Center. They brought in Snoop Dogg and Nelly a couple of years ago, and now, this month, they are bringing back Snoop Dogg. 2 nights. Can you believe that, folks? 2 nights at the BOK Center in Tulsa, March 24th and March 25th. Snoop Dogg, Ice Cube, and Warren G. It's like the early 90s hip-hop just took a dump all over you, and it's going to be glorious. I promise you that. 2 of the best of all time right there, and Warren G is just as great. So if you love your hip-hop, check that out, bokcenter.com. Also at the BOK Center in August, Poison will be making their return to Tulsa. And when I say making their return to Tulsa, I don't think Poison has been to Tulsa in like 30 years. They've been to Oklahoma a bunch. They've played Rocklahoma a few times. They have played Oklahoma City several times. Of course, Bret Michaels solo has been around, but Poison as a band I don't think has played Tulsa since like 91. I could be wrong, but that's what I'm running with right now. That show also features Tom Kiefer of Cinderella and LA Guns. So you get a great glam era rock fest right there at the BOK Center in August. Once again, bokcenter.com, debconcerts.com. Follow them on Facebook, DEB Concerts, also on Twitter and Instagram. And of course, mention that you heard about them here, and we'll also, of course, bring you announcements as they come, such as Rocklahoma, because DEB Concerts books the Roadhouse stage at Rocklahoma every year. So we'll be talking about that soon enough. All right. Last Saturday night, I saw the Ghost Volbeat tour. Well, I saw part of it. I actually was working the show, and I caught most of Ghost. I heard Volbeat in their entirety, but I did not get to see them. And same with Twin Temple. I heard them in their entirety, did not get to see them. But I really love this tour package because you've got 2 bands, or actually 3 bands, because I've seen some comments about Twin Temple in recent months. But you've got 3 bands that are very divisive, I guess, or polarizing to fans. You know, when it comes to Ghost, there's several reasons people love them and several reasons people don't love them. And I always kind of laugh at the reasons people don't love them. I get, it's kind of funny. We're talking about Ghost here on a podcast with a gentleman who is the lead vocalist of a Christian band. But as you'll hear in this podcast, or this interview coming up, John Cooper loves all kinds of stuff. And Skillet, as you know, has toured with all kinds of bands that are decidedly not Christian. All that aside, I get why people wouldn't like Ghost because of the satanic element. But I've always looked at that as just kind of a funny gimmick in a way, because even though they play it off seriously, of course, when you see him live, he, makes it kind of comedic in the way he talks in between the songs. And even though the lyrics are written in a serious manner, I still always look at them very tongue-in-cheek, But outside of that, I'm saying the reasons that people don't like Ghost always kind of crack me up, like, because they won the Grammy for Best Metal Band. It's like, and they're not metal. Big deal. It's the Grammys. The Grammys are about as irrelevant as a crap that I took last week. So I don't see how that's even an argument. Ghost is an amazing melodic hard rock band that has metal elements at times. They also have non-rock elements at times. And they're ever-changing, which I think is beautiful when bands can pull that off brilliantly. When if you listen to Ghost's first album and then listen to where they're at now, it's totally different, even though it still sounds like Ghost because you still got the same voice, the same writer. Of course, there's different musicians involved, but you know that that music is 99% from Tobias and probably not any of the other musicians in the band. I could be wrong, but regardless, they put on an excellent show. I've seen them many times. At this show, they played, I believe, 2, could have been 3 even, new tracks off the album that is coming, I believe, next month. Should have looked that up when that album's coming. There's already 3 or 4 singles out, and actually this week, just a day or 2 ago, they released the song 20s, which my former co-host here at the podcast, Jason, messaged me and said, hey, this song's kind of interesting. I checked it out, and that's a good way to put it. I don't really know if I really dig it or not. It's not amazing, but it's not bad. But there's a lot of songs that I hear like that 2 months later I absolutely love, or 2 months later I'm like never want to hear again. So we'll see which way that goes. But the other tracks from the album that they've released, like Hunter's Moon and Call Me Sunshine, are great songs. So right in the vein of Ghost. And on top of that, we also had Volbeat, which I am a bigger fan of Volbeat than I am of Ghost. And I've seen Volbeat live several times. So it wasn't the end of the world that I didn't get to see him. I'm glad I got to hear it. But, even when you're in a working environment, you're not going there to enjoy the show and check it out, you still kind of get that feeling like, man, that band's like right around the corner and I can't go in there and watch them. But they're musicians and music is meant for the ears, right? So thankfully I got to hear it. They sounded great. They, my only complaint, of course, being a dork fan, is that, this happens with a lot of bands that, such as Volbeat, their trajectory has been on an upward incline over the past, literally 10 years. They've been a band for 20 years, and their success in America has really picked up over the last decade. So, of course, when you put together a set list, you're going to focus on that past decade. And to me, Volbeat's greatest material is their first 4 albums, hands down. And I'm not one of those dorks that say stuff like that about Metallica or whatever. I still listen to Volbeat. I like the music they've released since, but it just didn't hit me the same as the earlier stuff did. Until the new album that came out late last year. I talked about it on the Best of 2021 episode. I feel like a lot of songs on there are returned to the earlier sound of Volbeat. And they played a few of those songs, which is great. Servant of the Mind is a fantastic song, so I was glad that was included in the set list. But regardless, if you're one of those people that are on the side that dig Volbeat and Ghost, or one or the other, this is definitely a tour to check out. They both played. Volbeat played right at 1 hour and 20 minutes, and Ghost was, I think, 1 hour and 30 minutes. So, it's a perfect night of rock and roll, and Twin Temple was about 25, 30 minutes. There's a rock show that's out there. It's great to see rock bands in, at the arena level, even if it's not, a sold-out mega arena. It's still an arena tour, and they're still putting butts in the seats. I was happy to see, how many people piled into that show in Dallas. I've been to shows in Dallas going back to, what was the first show in Dallas I saw? Maybe 94. Many shows throughout the years at many different venues. But I have never been to the Fair Park Coliseum, and I've seen many shows, listed as playing there throughout the years that I didn't go to, obviously. And I would just like to say here on record that that's just a shitty venue. And I don't say that lightly because, there's some venues out there that are kind of run down that, still have a good feel to them. The Cain's Ballroom, before they remodeled, was kind of, not the greatest looking place in the world, but it still was excellent because it's the Canes and it sounded great. But the Fair Park Coliseum, it's just the layout of it, the logistics of it. You could tell that it was meant, it's at the fairgrounds, obviously. It's a fair park. It was meant for like rodeos and that kind of thing. And that's the way it's set up with 2 separate sides, 2 separate concourses. It's just a weird logistic thing for a show. And on top of that, the sound just wasn't great for a concert. It wasn't horrible, but it's one of those arenas that if you're on the side, it just loses a lot. Because I kind of walked around the place during Ghost, and it would just the sound would just drop out or just get muffled, and Anyway, that's my bitching about the Fair Park Coliseum. No one really cares. It's done and gone. So I'm just letting you know that if there's shows there in the future, I probably won't attend them. But there's so many venues in Dallas now that probably won't be the case anyway. So I don't know if stuff was going on that night, why the show wasn't at the Bomb Factory or even the American Airlines Center. Is, probably a little too big for that show, but they could have done it like in the lower bowl or something. But there was probably a Dallas Mavericks game. Who knows? All right, let's move along. Quit rambling. I feel like there was something else I wanted to bring up, but I'm not going to worry about it because it's not at the top of my head. John Cooper, the lead vocalist and bassist of Skillet. Skillet's now been around since 96. John Cooper, founding member, basically the only original member left. But his wife Corey has been in the band for a good majority of that time now as well. And as we talk about in this episode, this interview coming up, Jen and Seth have been in the band now for well over a decade as well. I think since probably like 2009 or 10. This lineup, since they've joined the band, of course, the band's seen their most consistent success. I know they had some success, before this current lineup, but the Skillet that people know and love, that is the mainstream rock juggernaut that they have now become, definitely seen the height of their career over this past decade. And I say juggernaut because, it's like I do this podcast, so I'm always trying to keep up with stuff. And I know that just in general, me and Jason used to talk a lot about how we're just music dorks, and if we get together and hang out or we send a message to each other, 75% of the time, it's probably about music. As a person that greatly follows this stuff, I know just as well as anybody that Skillet, is a big band. They headline tours with great bands under them, that people look at as huge as themselves. They'll play festivals as a headliner or like the second band down. But I just didn't realize like how big this band's reach was until I was like looking at their Spotify numbers and YouTube numbers, like leading up to this interview. And I was just shocked that they have, I think it was like 7 or 8 songs with over 100 million listens on Spotify alone. And that's pretty impressive because there's bands that you would view as being bigger than Skillet that don't have a single song with over 100 million listens. And then on top of that, the song Monster, which is like their highest listened to song on Spotify, when you combine YouTube and every other platform, read something like it's over 4 billion streams, and it's like one of the top 3, I think, most streamed rock songs in history now, which is just awesome, for this band, and just always crazy whenever I read stats like that. So, very glad to have John Cooper here to talk about this new album. The new album came out here in mid-January. We talked pretty early on about a song, Destiny. When I first heard that, I just love when I hear a song, every once in a while a song comes along that the chorus is just so huge that it just resonates with me and just sticks with me. And that's exactly what this song did. Like, just sonically and musically, the chorus is just extremely epic, even though the song itself, is a typical like 4-minute rock song and sounds like Skillet, and he even talks about how it's the most probably Skillet sounding song on the album compared to that it could fit on other albums, that kind of thing. But that chorus is just so massive to me. And then on top of that, just lyrically, it's got a great message. It's one of those songs that can just kind of, lift you up if you're feeling down. And, Skillet has always done that lyrically. And that's another thing to point out is that their lyrics have always been, even though they're a Christian band, you can take the lyrics, even if you weren't a Christian, you could take the lyrics because they're not in your face that, hey, this is a song about faith or this is a song about Christianity. You can take the song and apply it to yourself in whatever way, and it can help you. Those words can help you. And, I don't know kind of where I'm going with this, but I think you know what I mean. Very happy to have John on here to talk about all this stuff. So let's just jump into it. Here's John Cooper of Skillet. You in looks like a locker room or something there? Or?
I am in a not the best dressing room of my career. it's like this big. Look at this. You know what? We have a bathroom, so I am not complaining at all. You know what I'm saying?
Right. What are the percentages on that usually like?
Well, this tour
not too often
is good because thankfully this is an arena tour, so there's always a bathroom. But not on other tours. It's hit and miss, man. You're always thinking, oh, please let there be a restroom backstage. You never know, bro.
Right. All right. Well, just kind of jumping into this. Dominion's been out now a little over a month. You happy with the response you've gotten from fans and media so far from this thing?
Sorry, do my thing. Yeah. It's going good. I mean, I'm sorry. I didn't have time to set this up before we did it. Now I can see that my head's getting cut off. Yeah, It's going great. Yeah, Dominion's been out. I think you're right. About a month. Fans really love it. That's always the most important thing. You got to get those people that have been with you for a long time. You have this like, I want to make those people happy because they've been with me so long, and they'll let you know. They'll let you know if they don't like it. And so, right. The record came out and the fan response was really big. One of the things I wasn't surprising was I had a lot of messages like, man, hadn't loved the last couple of records, but this record brought me back. I was surprised because, our records have continued to sell. So you don't always know. You lose some fans, you gain brand new fans. And this one seems to be bringing in some other people back and new fans. So I don't know what that means, except that it's good. I hope you like it. We love the record, so I hope the fans dig it.
The song that jumped out to me at first listen was Destiny, and that's the song I just constantly go back to. Like, what's your favorite track or a couple of your favorite tracks on the album?
Oh, that's cool to hear, man. I think that you're the only interview that I've had who has said that.
Okay.
That I can remember. And it's cool because Destiny is my favorite song on the record. So I get to talk about it all the time, but nobody has ever led with. So me and you, we're basically awesome. All right. So,
right.
But some fans have said that it was their favorite. I've seen those messages. To me, Destiny is the song that is the most like Skillet. It's the most that kind of sounds like it could have been on a different Skillet album, Maybe that's the reason I like it, because that's what I tend to, every artist has a way they tend to write, it's something that it's the way that you express something, and it begins to sound, like, oh, that kind of sounds like Skillet. You want to try new things. You don't want to just keep doing the same thing over and over. But at the same time, there's a certain amount of people that like that thing that you do. You know what I mean? Like, I never personally got tired of that thing you two did, with Joshua Tree and Rattle and Hum and all those great records. So AC/DC, I don't want AC/DC to do anything new. Just keep doing what you do and don't mess with it,
Right.
So Destiny is a song that's the most like older Skillet, and it's very melodic, but it's heavy, and it's got a really uplifting message. I mean, it's about on a personal level, that song is about forgiveness. Forgiving someone. We all struggle with bitterness, or to some degree, forgiving someone that doesn't deserve it. But what you end up finding is that when you don't forgive someone, it's like a poison. It's a poison inside of you that you get bitter, and it gets worse and worse. And so I think there's an interesting point to be made that forgiveness is me forgiving you is not actually for you. In the end, it actually does the most for me. You know what I mean? If I'm bitter. And that's what that song is saying. It's saying, darkness isn't my destiny. I don't have to give in and become this person that I don't want to be. And so that's why that song is so important to me, because I've had issues in my life where I've struggled with deep anger, and some darker side of me where I have wanted to hurt people who hurt me. And I had to work through that forgiveness. And that's a longer story. But the good news is that I did work through that forgiveness, and I found such peace afterwards. And so I want to kind of pass that along to people. If you're struggling, if you've been hurt, if you've been struggling with depression and whatever that is. Other songs that I think that fans seem to like on the record, probably Standing in the Storm. That seems to be a big one that has jumped out to a lot of fans. And that one probably brings in some of our Linkin Park influences, some more of the hip hop influences that would be more, electronic, but also metal, that kind of stuff. There's a convergence on Standing in the Storm that I think is kind of cool. It even has a tiny bit of rapping. It's not really rapping, but it's more like the syncopation that you may hear on a Disturbed song, like old Disturbed, especially like, Down with a Sickness or something like that. It's almost rap, but it's kind of screamy rap. I'm a big fan of Disturbed, so I think that's kind of cool.
Well, when you mention electronic elements, something I've always wondered about with bands such as yours that incorporates that into a lot of songs, is that something that when you're writing, do you envision that stuff while you're writing a guitar part as well? Or is that something that comes after a song's completed and then you just add elements to it to enhance it?
That's a great question. It can kind of go either way. We've been doing electronics in our music for so long that sometimes I can envision it. I kind of know what it's going to be like. Sometimes we'll start though with the music already done before we begin, really writing the lyrics or the melody. My wife Corey plays in Skillet. Some people don't know. She is, in fact, we're celebrating 25 years of marriage March 1st. So that's pretty cool.
Congrats.
25, yeah, thank you. 25 years of marriage, 26 years of Skillet. And so Corey produces a lot of our music, and she's a fantastic programmer and keyboard player, and she plays guitar as well. So a lot of times she will come up with this great, weird electronic stuff, and I'll hear it, and maybe I will add a guitar part to it. I'll be like, oh, I can write a guitar riff for that. Or maybe she already had it to start with. So that really helps. If you have the person that does the programming in the band, then it sort of becomes your sound, and you're not relying on an outside source. So for Linkin Park, it would be really hard to imagine Linkin Park without all their electronics, right? I mean, with all the, especially like when Hybrid Theory came out, all the record scratching and all those hip hop beats, it would be pretty tough to imagine Linkin Park without those elements, Trent Reznor, I mean, without Trent Reznor's industrial stuff, I don't know what that would, look like for Nine Inch Nails. Of course, Trent Reznor's talented, so he can kind of do anything, soundtracks and all sorts of other. But for Nine Inch Nails, it's going to be weird without that industrial machine noises. Go into a sawmill and record a Nine Inch Nails song or whatever, however he does what he does. That was meant to be complimentary, and by the way, in case anybody didn't pick up on that, that's a very big. If you can go to a sawmill and make a hit song from the noises, then you're pretty awesome.
That's right. Well, I guess kind of another question along writing lines as well. Like you guys have, most of your songs have the dual vocals. When you're coming up with lyrics and melody lines and all that stuff, is that something that's thought of while that's going on? Like I'm going to sing this, she's going to sing this, or is that something that comes after it's all written?
That's also very similar. I mean, a lot of times I'll have that stuff in my head. I'll be like, this is what I want. It needs to be that and this. And not to keep talking about Linkin Park stuff. I feel like I'm promoting Linkin Park more than promoting myself. Everybody go listen to my record. Screw Linkin Park. But bands like that, I mean, they're certainly not the only one. You also hear this in hip hop a lot, especially if it's an artist. Even in pop, like the Black Eyed Peas, okay, or a hip hop artist where you have a rapper and then they have a guest vocalist. You have Mary J. Blige just singing, with a rapper, and so you have the rap, then you have the singing. It's basically hip hop and urban music has just done that really well. You're adding hooks upon hooks upon hooks. You also get that in the old Michael Jackson music, Thriller, and that amazing production. So I kind of started envisioning Skillet trying that. Why don't we try that with two singers, with a guy and a girl? Now, you may have had some of those things on older stuff like Meatloaf, Fleetwood Mac in the 70s. It was very theatrical and, very almost like musical almost, even like ABBA. I know these are all like crazy references, but all that goes into what makes Skillet about let's bring the drama of that into what Skillet does. Actually, Evanescence did that as well, of course, on that first massive hit they had with the guy from 12 Stones, wake me up. You're having all these hooks. And so I can hear those things generally when I'm writing. That probably comes from my classical music, background. My mom was a piano teacher. So I grew up playing classical piano. I actually wasn't allowed to listen to any rock music or even pop music, nothing with drums, nothing with guitar. And so my whole upbringing was classical, as well as church music, gospel music, whatever. Church music, classical music. A lot of people don't know that I played the trombone as well. I played the trombone in marching band and symphonic band all the way through college and stuff. So that classical music background probably plays into the orchestration of Skillet's vocals and instrumentation.
Kind of a side question based off of what you just said, like at what age were you able to listen to secular music or outside of classical music? Or
right.
Was it something you just snuck and started listening to on your own, or how did that kind of incorporate itself in?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's funny because for anybody watching the show now, it's under 30 or under 40, maybe. I mean, they don't know how awesome it was to grow up in the 80s because, now, you go to the mall or whatever it is that young people do, and all you hear is pop music. But when we were growing up, you'd go to the mall and you'd hear Metallica and you'd hear Bon Jovi and Motley Crue. I mean, you'd go to the ice cream shop and they would be playing Motley Crue, Wild Side or something,
Yeah.
Metal was everywhere. And so when I really began, hearing metal, I was just out. And so my best friend got his first guitar when he was in 6th grade, so he starts learning how to play all these, Wild Side and Panama and Van Halen and all. And I'd be like, what is this music? Show it to me. So I would hear all the music at my friend's house by the time I was in 6th grade. And I just fell in love. I fell in love with metal, glam metal, speed metal as well. I mean, I guess early Metallica would that be classified as speed metal, wouldn't it be? I would call it thrash even.
Thrash, yeah.
I just loved it. And so that's when I really got into music, and I was just one. I mean, it was just, I had never heard anything like it. It made me feel good in a way that no other music made me feel good.
Well, kind of bringing it back to the album for a second, I read in the bio for it that it said you guys recorded this 100% remotely. Like, what was that? What was that process like? I assume that's probably the first time you guys had done something like that on a full album scale.
Yeah, it was bizarre. I'm telling you, it's the weirdest thing. All right. And we wouldn't have been able to do it if Corey, my wife, wasn't a producer. Okay. So I'm working with Kevin Churko and his son, Kane Churko. And in case people don't know who Kevin Churko is, He's my favorite producer. Kevin Churko did all the Five Finger Death Punch records, which I'm a huge Five Finger Death Punch fan, which is how I heard of Kevin Churko. Ozzy, Papa Roach. I actually met Kevin through Jacoby Shaddix from Papa Roach, who's a good friend of mine. When I think around 2013 or 14, when they had recorded that record, and I was listening to the record with Jacoby before it came out, and I was like, dude, your vocals sound amazing on this record. It's the production is so great. And he's like, yeah, Churko really did a great job. And I was like, are you talking about Kevin Churko? Kevin did this record? And he said, yeah. And I said, do you think you'd give me his phone number? It's like we're a bunch of junior high school girls,
Right.
Give me his phone number. So I called Kevin Churko, and he knew who Skillet was, which I was surprised. So we started a relationship there. He's an amazing producer. And so we were scheduled to fly out to work with Kevin on a couple of new songs. And because of COVID restrictions, if everybody obviously knows, all the travel restrictions kept changing. Certain cities were putting new ordinances and then changing it. It just didn't work out. And I was really bummed because I was like, Kevin, I really want to work on this song. And I said, what if we get together on Zoom? We'll throw around some ideas. It probably isn't going to work, but it might, And so anyway, all this to say, long story short, we got on Zoom and it went really good. I couldn't believe it because I didn't want to do Zoom. Kevin didn't want to do Zoom, but we did it. And then it just went really well. And so Kevin had a bunch of tracks that he had produced, some ideas, and he sent them over to us. And then we went into my studio with my wife, and then we fiddled around and added guitars and did our thing. And I sang and sent it back. And all of a sudden, 4 days later, we were done. I mean, it was with a song. And it was good. And so then I got kind of superstitious. I was like, that song went so good. It was Surviving the Game was the first song we wrote. Then I was like, I don't want to fly out there. It's like the football player that doesn't change his socks after winning a game. I was like, I don't want to come. So we ended up recording the entire record in my studio, and then Kevin and Kane in their studio. And it just worked. I think one of the things that made it cool, I'm just self-deprecatingly being honest, was that because I wasn't there, I wasn't there to naysay certain things that maybe I would naysay, like, I don't know about that chord. That doesn't sound very Skillet. Or the drums are a little this or that or the other. I wasn't there to naysay, and it gave Kevin, I think, a little opportunity to try some things that maybe I wouldn't have liked at first. And then when I heard it, I was like, now I see what he's doing. Or I would send him something, and then he would send it back to me, and he would have changed my chords. And I would have been like, dude, you changed my chords, but I wasn't there. And I was like, maybe it's better. It's probably better. So sometimes you have to let go a little bit in order to try something new. Don't be cocky and don't be arrogant, and be humble enough to say, if you're working with your favorite producers, why don't you let them do something that you wouldn't do? And I think it made a big difference on the album.
So having a good experience doing that, is that something you think you guys might try again in the future, or you'll just wait and see?
You can't change the socks now.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I'm just joking. I don't. I mean, maybe. I mean, the bad part about it was that part of what I love about recording with Kevin and Kane is that we're all really good friends. So I'm like, I didn't get to see them. We didn't get to hang out and have a meal together, and that was a bummer. But it did go so good that I wouldn't mind doing like this again if we had to. But Lord willing, we won't have to. Hopefully the world's opening up. Hopefully we're on the backside of all of this stuff, and next time we can hang out together.
Right. Shifting a little bit from music for a second, you have been in the headlines a lot over the past few months, and from sites like Blabbermouth, based off of stuff from your podcast or other interviews. Is that something that, do you worry about alienating any fans with anything you say? Because I mean, most of the stuff you're talking about, it's always thought-provoking, and it requires discussion that's thought-provoking as well. But you still get a lot of fans that just don't want to hear from musicians in that sense or that kind of thing. But how do you handle that, or do you even pay attention to that kind of thing?
Sure. It is unfortunate. I mean, you definitely get into dicey territory when you're talking about life issues and culture and things like that. I kind of wanted to try to do it because out of a genuine love for people, because I know so many people personally who have just gotten so confused and they're anxious all the time and they're stressed out all the time. And I wanted to do it to try to help, namely young people who maybe don't have time to read history, to read what's happening in the world, philosophy. A lot of the times they are long discussions, so I do realize that not everybody's going to dig that. The thing that I don't like, to be 100% honest with you, is as you just said, a lot of times they're long discussions. So let me give you an example. I listen to podcasts or people about politics that I don't agree with at all. I mean, 100%. I would never, ever agree with them. But when I listen to them explain why they believe what they believe, I go, oh, I see what you're saying. It doesn't make me mad. It doesn't bother me. There's a thought process of why they get there. And I appreciate long form podcasts because it does that. The thing that is not helpful, I think, in our society is that what people will do, whatever side you're on, is they go on and listen to a podcast and they take the one sentence that is the most inflammatory thing possible. And then they go, so and so says, dogs are stupid or whatever, they hate dogs. And then everybody goes, I hate you for hating dogs. But really, if you had listened to the thought process, you would understand that this was very pensive. And there's a lot of thoughts that go into it. And I'm always gracious towards someone else disagreeing with me. I mean, I always say things like that. And I would say this, I have 15 employees besides my band. Almost no one that works for me shares the same faith that I do. Most everybody that works with me are atheist or agnostic moving towards atheist. Almost none of them hold the same political positions I do. And they're like my best friends. We live together on the road in a bus. And I would say this, for Skillet, I mean, most of the people that have worked for me have worked for me. There's hardly anybody that works for me that hasn't worked for me less than 5 or 7 years. I mean, these are people that worked with me for 15 years now. As atheists, I'm a Christian. As whatever they vote for, and I'm the opposite. And we get along really great. So I think it's not great when the headlines come out to try to sow something uber negative when that wasn't really the heart behind it. So yes, I don't love that happens. It's unfortunate. At the same time, I believe very much in free speech, and I've never called for anyone to be deplatformed or canceled. I don't care if people make fun of me or even my faith in particular or say terrible things about what I believe. I would never ask for them to be canceled or pulled off social media. I would just argue the philosophy, and to me that's what true liberalism is. It's conversation back and forth. And if you don't like it, then turn it off. So anyway, that's where I stand on it. So it can make me seem very rigid and very unfriendly. In reality, that's not the case. I mean, I've toured with Corey Taylor from Slipknot. He is a good, I consider us to be good friends. Jacoby from Papa Roach. These are good friends of mine. We don't agree on a lot of things, and it's never once bothered our friendship. And I appreciate knowing what other people think. So that's my bag.
I guess kind of a slightly better subject, or a subject most people could agree upon, is a strong relationship. And like you mentioned, you guys are coming up on 25 years of marriage, and a lot of people couldn't work with their spouse or their better half on a regular basis. And you guys are, in the thick of it, and your careers are intertwined. Like, how do you think doing that for so long has strengthened your relationship, like your personal relationship?
Yeah, 25 years. And she definitely is my better half, by the way. Yeah, I mean, we're so lucky. I mean, honestly, obviously, let's just be honest. Being married is hard work. Anybody that's married that's watching this podcast knows that. There it is. You're not going to get along sometimes. People come up to me at every show, guys and girls, and they go, I could never work with my spouse ever. I could never spend 24 hours a day with my spouse. It has its moments because we used to be in a bus with 12 other people. So we had 14 people in one bus. and two of those people were my own kids, so they were babies at the time. That is hard work. You're going to have those moments, but I think that in that there's something really beautiful about it that has very much caused the entire Skillet group, as trite or cheesy as this sounds, the whole group feels like a family, because we are. My kids have been on the road since they were babies. My kids now are 19 and 16, FYI. So they 2 months old, 5 months old, and they were there. Everybody would have to kind of roll like a family. You can't be screaming in the bus all night long when you got two babies asleep. And so it just became this atmosphere where everybody's kind of in it together. And like I said, when you have employees that have worked for you for 12, 13 years, 15 years, that really says something. And not to pat myself on the back in any way, just giving you the goods. I think we were probably one of the few bands that kept all of those employees on salary for all of 2020, when we had no income, but it's been a family for 10 years, 15 years. Why change that now? They've done a lot for me, and I want to do what I want to pay it forward, whatever the terminology you prefer. That's not to pat myself on the back. That's to say they've been extremely loyal to me, and I want to be loyal to them. So I think that the marriage relationship has very much made it a family atmosphere. And then when we tour with other bands, they pick up on that as well. I think one of my favorite Skillet memories of all time. This will blow away some people. I don't know if this has ever been shared on a podcast before. One of my favorite Skillet memories of all time is Maria from In This Moment, at catering, playing Barbies with my daughter when my daughter was 7 years old. My daughter's showing her Barbie dolls and her little pets or whatever they were called, and thinking if fans knew what was happening behind stage at this metal show, and you're seeing very different kinds of people from different places have a meal together and be human beings. It was just so beautiful. One of my favorite memories of being on tour.
Well, I guess in that same kind of sense, you mentioned that family atmosphere. The lineup of Skillet, now has been the same lineup for well over a decade. And before that, you had a lot of changes going on here and there. Like, even though you had success before this current lineup, do you kind of look at this lineup and what was previously as two separate entities?
That's an interesting question. I hadn't considered that, because I've literally never considered that, because you do have that with Van Halen or Van Hagar.
Yeah.
There are those times when something shifts. I kind of have never looked at it that way myself, but that's not to say that perhaps I shouldn't. I've just never contemplated it. I think the reason is because before we had Seth and Jen, which, as you mentioned, has been well over a decade now. Before then, we did have several other members, and those were not what I would call uber successful years, really, until 2006 or 7. That's when people started knowing who Skillet was. And probably because my wife and I write all the music, it probably doesn't feel as much like a shift. In other words, meaning when Sammy Hagar came on the scene, it wasn't just a brand new voice, but the style of writing seemed to kind of change into something a little bit different, and Skillet didn't really have that. So I don't view it like that, but it's an interesting point. Seth has been in the band now, I believe, for 12 years. Jen has been in the band for at least 13, maybe almost 14 now.
Final question for you. Throughout the years, your guys' music has been incorporated in a lot of stuff with WWE, and I'm a big wrestling fan myself. I was just curious if you're a wrestling fan or if that's just a business relationship.
Right. Well, here's the thing. I honestly love wrestling,
Okay.
but the truth is I'm not necessarily as much up to date.
Right.
Like I know some of the people and I know what they look like. I even know like sometimes their moves, but I don't watch it enough to remember all their names. I love the guy that he's really tall and he's got really long hair and he's got like tattoos on his chest. And he's called, I always forget his name. And I love that guy. Is he Roman something?
Oh yeah. Roman Reigns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That guy is awesome. So, I always love, I'm from Memphis, Tennessee. And a lot of people, a lot of people don't know that Mid-South, wrestling was a really big deal. I mean, we had Randy the Macho Man, Savage, which is my favorite wrestler of all time, would always be on Saturday morning, like public television wrestling, like local. And so I grew up watching wrestling. And another funny story, Jerry Lawler, he lived 2 houses down from my grandmother. And so I would go visit my grandma, be like, can I go over to see if Jerry Lawler's at his house? So I'd walk by the house. I only knocked on his door one time and I got his autograph. It was awesome. So I actually do love wrestling. WWE has been very, very good to Skillet. They believed in Skillet when really other people didn't get it. They were like, I don't want to get involved with the Skillet. I don't get them. I don't know what they're all about. And WWE took a chance on us. And I actually think it was WWE that propelled us to becoming an act at radio. I really do. So I owe them a lot. And they also put us on their video games, which are hugely successful games. And of course, it probably helps that I'm a fan because I promote WWE in general. I think I just like it. It's fun. It's a fun thing to take your son to,
Right. Right on, man. Well, I really love the new album. Looking forward to seeing what you guys got coming in the future. And I appreciate you taking the time with me today.
So cool. I sure loved being on the show. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
There you go, John Cooper of Skillet. A huge thank you to Velvet of the Media Collective for helping with that one. And of course, a massive thank you to John for taking out some time there to sit there and talk to me on Zoom for a bit. It was on a show day, as you could probably tell there at the beginning of that interview. Like we mentioned there, the new album Dominion came out in January, so check that if you have not yet. A lot of cool stuff there. We talked about WWE there towards the end. If you're not familiar, if you don't pay attention to wrestling, or even if you do and you aren't familiar with the fact that Skillet's music has been used many times over the past probably 12, 15 years. And most recently, I know their song Legendary was the theme song for Raw for a year or two. WWE will change the theme song for Raw and SmackDown every year or two, and Legendary was the theme song around like 2019, 2020, I think. And then throughout the years, they'll use their songs for, pay-per-views or video packages and that kind of stuff. So really cool to talk a little bit about that. And then, of course, all the other stuff we mentioned. So, once again, massive thank you to John Cooper of Skillet. And if this is your first time listening because you're a Skillet fan, I appreciate you checking this out. Along the veins of Skillet, some past guests of this podcast include members of Shinedown. I've had on Josh Todd of Buckcherry, Elias from Nonpoint, John Connolly of Seven Dust, Kevin Martin of Candlebox, 2 of the members of Clutch, Neil Fallon and Tim Solt. I've had on members of Drowning Pool, Saving Abel, Sons of Texas, Saul, Royal Republic, Tetrarch, Trapped. Outside of that vein as well, we've had on Rock and Roll Hall of Famers such as Gene Simmons of Kiss, Glenn Hughes of Deep Purple and the Dead Daisies, Dizzy Reed of Guns N' Roses, Vivian Campbell of Def Leppard and Dio. We've had on members of Megadeth, Testament, Tesla, Warrant, Shooter Jennings, Vanilla Ice has been on this podcast. All kinds of people throughout the years. We just had on Jeff Tate, the original voice of Queensryche, just last week, so check that one out if you have not yet. We've got some cool stuff coming up, so be on the lookout. Wherever you're listening to this right now, hit like, subscribe, follow, whatever it is, so you don't miss future episodes. You can listen pretty much anywhere. We're on Spotify, Apple Music. You can listen directly from the website, which is thethunderunderground.com. All the social medias are there, so follow on all those. And anytime you see a post from Thunder Underground, like it or comment or share or anything like that is an easy way to help out the podcast. It spreads it around. Great help. So much appreciate when you do that. I guess that covers it for another week. Once again, a huge thank you to Med Farm, Sunset Tattoo, DEB Concerts, and John Cooper of Skillet. And until next time.
That's a great name for a podcast. I love it.
Thank you.
It's so
Straight
cool.
from the Aussie song.
It's so cool.
All right.
I love that.
Thunder Underground, y'all.